Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on how to master the 3 C's of social selling with our friends from LinkedIn and Evernote. This webinar will be hosted by Hubspot. My name is Amanda Sibley. I want to go over quick housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded, so feel free to sit back and relax. It will be emailed out to you later in the week, along with the slides, and a few extra special things we'll go over during the webinar. Feel free to interact with us in the questions panel here on the webinar or on Twitter using the hashtag 3CSocialSelling. If we get any questions on either of those, we'll try to ask as many as we can during the Q&A with the speakers. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Josh.
Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Zirkle, the User Education Specialist here at Evernote. Just want to say thanks for spending your time with us. We're looking forward to the next hour.
Hey, folks. Mark Roberge with HubSpot. Really excited to be here.
This is Koka Sexton from LinkedIn. Very excited to be a part of this.
Great.
So let's get into the agenda. So today we're going to cover context-based social selling and what does that mean? Sales and marketing alignment, and it's the big question: how do we get sales and marketing teams to be working off the same sheet of music? And then ultimately, how do we collaborate among these teams? What tools do we use to get the information from marketing into sales to be most effective? And then we'll start discussing some real-world issues that are being solved. So with that, let's start off with my favorite subject, social selling. Here at LinkedIn, we have a definition for what social selling is, and how we define that is leveraging your social brand to fill your pipeline with the right people, insights, and relationships. And what I mean by that is, as an individual salesperson or a sales leader, you have a brand outside of your company. And I think it's very important for sales professionals or professionals in general to understand how they leverage that brand and how do you build your business from that. And you do that by finding the right people to be in business with, leveraging insights based on information you're finding online, as well as information that you're getting from these connections. And then how do you build those relationships? Because we ultimately know that relationships matter. So how do you do it? From within creating your professional brand, it's really about how are you leveraging your profiles. I'm a little biased. I'm very focused on LinkedIn, but with any social platform you're a member of, how are you presenting yourself? Are you polished? Are you professional? Are you talking about things that are relevant to your connections? Finding the right people is really about how do you prospect most efficiently, and leveraging search and research to find the right decision makers. And ultimately engaging with insights. So how are you discovering valuable information about these people that you want to be connected to based on their social profiles or LinkedIn profiles, things that they're sharing with their networks, and leveraging that information to be of use to you? And what this really comes down to is building stronger relationships. At the end of the day, people buy from people. They don't buy from companies. So how are you building the relationships today that are going to become profitable for you in the future? And you do this by expanding your network to reach these prospects who can then introduce you to new prospects. And I think this is a great transition. So what do you need to be successful? We talk about what it is to be in social selling, but what does it mean? And I think this is where this alignment of sales and marketing really comes to a head. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mark.
Thanks, Koka. Hey, folks. So what would social selling be without content? That's such a foundational element of it. I mean, the pure essence of being social is to have a voice, and this content is our voice in the whole spectrum. So I'm going to talk about 3 things quickly here. One is, how do we think about the content that we want to use in our social selling? 2, how do we create an efficient and consistent stream of high-quality content within our social selling strategy? And then 3, how do we measure the success? How do we hold each other accountable to successful social selling with this particular content? So the voice will first turn over to a great thought leader, Ann Hadley, along this topic. And just remind ourselves, this isn't about pitching our product. This isn't about, pitching our features. It's about educating prospects around the pains that they're having, the questions that they're having. This is the best content that's going to work in social selling. These prospects at the early stages of their buyer journey, so let's appreciate that. Right? Obviously, the more we can collaborate as marketers with sales and sales with marketing to do this, the better. Sales oftentimes represents that frontline conversation. You can think of a spectrum of ideas on how to do this. At HubSpot, we sit our marketers amidst the sales team. We actually have some marketers spend some of their time on listening in on demonstrations and conversations, and we do a bunch of surveys just to understand what objections people are getting hung up with to get a sense of what content would be useful. So there's a spectrum of ideas you can do to make sure you're always collaborating with sales. And then most importantly, as salespeople, just get out there on the front line. I often challenge salespeople, if you're going to look ahead to the next month and prospect for 60 hours in the month, take 5 hours and don't prospect, 1 hour a week, and just spend some time on social media doing some participation. Go find the blogs that your prospects are reading and comment on those articles. Go into Twitter and follow the people that your prospects are following and retweet their stuff and understand what they're talking about. Go into LinkedIn groups and where your prospects are hanging out and pose questions and comment on some of the hot questions that are in there. I bet you as you reflect back on the prior month and think about that 4 or 5 hour investment, you would have yielded more business than if you were just cold calling or prospecting. Right? All right, and then, so that's like, how do we think about the content? We'll have a much better sense if we do that interaction as to what the hot trends are and what the hot topics are. Now, how do we produce content in a really efficient way? I don't really get excited when I see executives walking away or salespeople walking away thinking that they are going to blog. People are just really busy, and to be honest, some people aren't the best writers. They're not the most interesting writers. I love it when companies can separate the thought leadership from the journalistic arm and time, right? So if you as executive team can go out and build some sort of journalistic arm, it could be an intern at one of the local universities that's studying journalism for half day a week. It could be a full-time hire of a young journalist or an experienced journalist. Not to joke about it, but that industry is not exactly on fire right now. And very few people, including the journalists themselves, realize that they hold the keys to the future of lead generation. So take advantage of that, right? So go into your company, form a thought leadership committee, your executive team, your sales team, your engineers. Maybe there's 5 people, 10 people, 15 people on it. Who knows? And every Tuesday, schedule a 1 hour interview between one of them and your journalist, and have them interview for an hour. From that 1 hour interview, that journalist should be able to produce a 5-page ebook, a 3 to 5 page ebook. They should also be able to produce 3 or 4 blog posts on the same topic. And they should also be able to schedule, a few dozen Facebook posts and LinkedIn posts and tweets out there around the same topics. That 1 hour created a bunch of stuff that can be scheduled over the course of the month. All those social media messages are going out. They're linked back to the blog articles. People read the blog articles, and at the end of the blog articles, a nice call to action that says, did you like this blog article? Maybe you'll like the 5-page ebook we wrote on the same topic. Click here. They click there, and in exchange for your name, phone number, email, title, and company name, that ebook is yours for free. And that simple little process creates a huge social media following, drives your organic traffic up, creates really good content across your entire site, and increases the visit-to-lead ratio that you need for your website to perform well, right? So a great way to create a nice, consistent content production process. And then finally, measurement, right? So as you can see through this process, sales and marketing are working hand in hand. There's kind of a blurred line here on what everyone's responsible for. So it's really important here that we hold each other accountable with as clear and quantitative measures as possible between those two groups, right? So we actually call this the SLA. We stole it from the world of IT, which means service level agreement. It's a really quantified goal setting for both marketing and sales in this arrangement. And here's one example of how you do it. So marketing, my advice there is try to set the goal as deep into the buy cycle as possible for marketing. As a marketer, don't set the goals around clicks or conversions. Set it deeper down into revenue. And here's one example of what we did. We actually study the conversion rates of various collateral, right? So in this case, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, this is our mid-market business. and we studied a couple thousand webinar downloads, or webinar registrants, and we studied a couple thousand demo requests. And we know that the conversion rate of a webinar lead is, say, 1%, and the conversion rate of a demo request is, say, 5%. Well, if you multiply that conversion rate times the average spend of those ultimate customers, you actually reverse engineer a lead value. And this is what you see here is this is made up data, but these are example lead values on all these types of leads. And this allows you to put marketing not on a lead goal, but a revenue goal that they can try to achieve immediately. Right? So try to set those goals as deep as possible. And by the way, sales does not get off the hook. If marketing is going to be that accountable for their work, then sales should be accountable to working those deep leads efficiently and the way that buyers want to be worked. Right? So this is an example study that we did, and it actually studied, I think, 50,000 leads and showed what the optimal number of attempts against those leads are. The attempt number, like some of these leads were called twice. Some of them were called 12 times. I don't know why there was such a big difference. And the y-axis is like a profitability score. Obviously, the more you call a lead, the more likely you are to get them on the phone, but that's more expensive. So where's the optimal level? And this study showed that the optimal level in the black line was at around 9 attempts. The blue line was sort of smaller company segments, and that optimal level was 6 attempts. And like, for example, the red line, I think, was the mid-market, and that was a little bit of a higher number. Right? So this allows you to kind of go back to the team and say, if marketing can put this much effort into generating leads, then hey, sales has to work them in the right way that they should be worked. And both those groups are held accountable to that behavior every day. Right? So here's examples of charts that are sent out every single night showing how marketing and sales are doing against those SLA. It turns out we actually surveyed, I think, about 1,000 customers to find out those who did SLAs versus not, and what their cost of customer acquisition was. And you can see that the cost of customer acquisition for those running an SLA like this was almost half those that weren't. So this best practice is moving around the industry, and check it out and adopt it if you like it for your business. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Josh to finish up here with collaboration.
Great, thanks so much. So when you're working with sales and marketing to help meet the needs of your customers, it's important that what you're working on isn't siloed, that you're working together to best meet customer needs. Let's look at how to do that. When a salesperson is talking with a potential customer or prospect or one that they're already working with, it's important to gather as much information about each individual person and company so that you can really tailor your offerings to meet their needs. So capture things like the web pages that are important to their company or the competitors that they might be thinking about in terms of helping your products meet their needs. Think about what are they telling you on the phone? What are they saying that's maybe unsaid in terms of their desires and their needs for getting deeper into solving their particular problems or their challenge areas? And see what they're saying on social media. What are they talking about? What are they sharing with their communities? What are the pieces of content that they're collecting that they think are important? These are all really deep insights that you can use for your own conversations with them, and not just for your conversations, but also for the content that's being created. Because from this information, you can build really deep audience personas where you can identify who are the key stakeholders that you're talking to across your different customer profiles and build ideal personas from that. Think about, broadly speaking, what each of these individual personas is looking for. What are the specific problems that they're trying to solve? What are their individual needs and wants? And since you're probably speaking to multiple different people, each one of them will likely have slightly different, or maybe in some cases very different, needs, wants, and challenges. So think about building it out, and I think it's actually really helpful to have a picture of each person, really describe their role at the individual companies that you're targeting, and think about the enormity of what it is that they're trying to do in their work and how your solution fits into it. And then once you've really identified who these people are, write your marketing content and even your sales language around verbiage that would really speak to them, speak in their own language in a way that resonates with what it is that they're trying to do. So I know at HubSpot you have ideal customer personas that you use. Would you like to go into that a little bit and just share how that works?
Yeah, sure. So we actually, these are sample ones from the webinar, but yeah, we use Owner Ollie and Marketing Mary to initially in the business to define the different targets that we had. And you'd be surprised after you do so many of these particular, interactions, you really can generalize the behaviors and preferences of these folks pretty accurately across the board. And it's super helpful as we're, thinking about the marketing collateral and sort of like banging ideas against the table as to whether or not that would actually resonate with these folks. It's also super helpful in sort of our sales funnel to make sure that our messages are consistent and always in tune with their particular preferences and sort of the context of where they are in the buying journey.
Great, thank you. Once you've identified your personas, as we've seen, it's really helpful to really see what it is that they want and what their needs are. Once you've done that, sales and marketing can work together to collect ideas about what types of content would best meet their needs. Because you can't create content that's general enough for everyone and still works on a deep level for each one of these individual personas. So when you're talking with a potential customer or when you're in marketing and you're thinking about what each of these personas might need, have a central spot where you can collect the ideas that you're generating, whether that's an idea that you see online or, as we're seeing here, an article ripped out of a magazine. Have a space where marketing and sales together can capture all of those ideas. And then sit down periodically, maybe once a month or once a quarter, and go through the different ideas that have been collected. And then based on the personas that you've already identified, match up which ideas would best fit each of the individual personas. This can really help inform your marketing plans moving forward. Now, once you've decided on a strategy for moving forward with your marketing, then it's important to get everyone quite literally on the same page in terms of what's coming and when. And this is where having a shared marketing plan or calendar that everyone can see and contribute to becomes super important. Because what often happens in marketing and sales is each individual role gets really siloed. And sales isn't always aware of what marketing has that's coming that may be helpful to them or to the customers that they're speaking with. So it's important as marketing does its work of pushing information out the door and creating great content that they update this information on a calendar that sales can then see. And that way, when sales is having conversations or making presentations, they can refer back to important information that is coming out of marketing that could be of use to the people that they're speaking with. And of course, sharing content goes in both directions. So while sales might be talking with people, they might have ideas for templates that they'd like marketing to create for them to help better explain the offering. Or sales might be coming up with scripts that, based on what they're saying when they're working with customers, that marketing could use in their languaging when they produce marketing materials. So these types of pieces of content shouldn't live in disparate places. They should really be collected and shared amongst the different teams that can best use them. So think about the different tools that are used right now in sales and marketing. Look for ways to consolidate them, maybe streamline them, and definitely collect them in a space that everyone can refer back to. And just as an aside, as a thank you for being on the webinar, we'll be sharing via email after the webinar concludes some blank templates that you can use for your marketing plans and calendars, so you can get started right away. And now we're going to turn it back over to Mark.
Thanks, Josh. So those are the 3 C's, and now we're on to usually people's most favorite part is the Q&A. So please chime in with your questions, and we three will be, Amanda will be teeing us up with a few. So just to recap here, we went through the 3 C's. Really important to, in this day and age, leveraging the context of that buyer in social selling. Everybody's sort of at a different stage. Everybody's coming into it from a different foundation of knowledge and needs that next question. So the more you can appreciate that, the better. And then content is your voice. I mean, if you're not working hard on creating a content engine internally, then you can't really win this game, right? So you need to make sure you have a good content production strategy. And then the collaboration piece. As you can tell, this is not a solo, exercise here. This is cross-functional. It could be across peers just on the sales team. And obviously, it's high collaboration between sales and marketing to make sure you have one cohesive voice for the end buyer. So before we turn over Q&A, Amanda had mentioned we will be getting an email out with a recording within the next day, and there's some special goodies in there. One of those is actually we have some email templates ready for folks. We went out and asked great best-selling author Jill Conrath and HubSpot and our friends over at Repify to come up with their 3 best performing emails that they use in their sales processes or they've coached their people around. And we roll those up into a template that's ready for you guys. So there will be a link for you guys to access those if you'd like to see that. And now I'll turn it back to Amanda for Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Here are our speakers' usernames on Twitter if you would like to tweet to them as well. So we have a lot of questions coming in. My apologies if we do not get to all of them. Often what we do if we don't get to all of the questions is we will follow up with blog posts about it. Some of the questions will be answered on Twitter later, so have no fear, we will do our best. I do want to also mention quickly to anyone who joined us a few minutes late that the webinar has been recorded and will be sent out via email to everyone who has registered in the next few days, so don't worry about missing the first few minutes. With that, I'm going to jump into our first question that I think would be great if Coca, you could jump in here and answer. This question comes to us from Twitter. My sales team doesn't have the right materials to help my prospects solve their problems. What should I do?
So, when it comes to the tools needed, I think that it's important for sales professionals to be as visible as possible within every social network that their customers may be a part of. Obviously LinkedIn being the professional network, but that doesn't rule out Twitter and other networks as well. I think this is why, going through this webinar and listening to, HubSpot and Evernote talk about how these tools can all play together for collaboration and marketing and sales alignment. I think Mark said it best was, there is no social selling without content. And, salespeople, you need to hold your marketing professionals accountable to be providing you with the right content that is in the right context for your buyers. And I think context is something that is often overlooked because where the buyer is within the cycle really should determine what kind of content you're handing them and ultimately how you're delivering it to them. Email open rates are slow, so why not post something within your social stream that can then start feeding these prospects the information they need at the time that they need it.
And I think it's really helpful for sales and marketing to make sure that there's an open channel of communication so that collaboration can occur. So if a salesperson is talking with people on the phone and they know that they're not being able to send their prospects the materials that will help close the sale or move the process forward, then it's worthwhile to collaborate more with marketing to make sure that they're getting the sales tools and the sales support that they need. And vice versa, communication works in both directions. If marketing feels like they're out of the loop when it comes to what customers are actually thinking or what they're saying or what their questions are, it's definitely worth it to have more involvement with sales, who is often on the front lines in terms of talking with customers directly. So I think increased collaboration there can really make sure that sales has the tools that it needs and that marketing can provide things in ways that are actually usable and useful.
Awesome. Thank you both. Our next question comes to us from an email. Our marketing team creates a lot of content each month, but the sales team never uses it. What should I do? Josh, do you mind speaking to this?
Sure. If marketing feels like it's creating really great content but that sales isn't using it, I think there's a couple things that could be going on. First, sales may not be aware where the tools that are being created are, or they may feel like it's too difficult for them to access them. So creating a shared spot that's easy for everyone to access and is available wherever salespeople happen to be is critical. The second thing that might be happening is that the tools that marketing thinks are so awesome may not in fact be so awesome when it comes to actual real-world deployment by sales. So it would be worth it at this point if sales is not using the tools that are being deployed to have an in-depth conversation about what is really needed, what are people asking for, and what would be useful, and then go back to marketing with what those findings are.
Yeah, we've seen this to the nth degree at HubSpot ourselves. It's actually something that we've been tinkering with some hacker technology in the HubSpot Sales Lab to try to solve a little bit more cohesively. As you can imagine, we're just producing boatloads of content that has to do with different problems that people have in the funnel, different industries, different buyer personas. And then on the other side of the fence, you've got sales that are out there talking to specific buyer personas at specific industries with specific problems. It's next to impossible for them to know the ideal content to be engaging those folks with on follow-up emails, etc. So we're experimenting with a bunch of different ways around that. I know we've been tinkering with sort of tagging content according to those different problems and buyer personas, and then also on the other side of the fence, having sales designate what the persona's problem is in the CRM side and having the system try to do some matching. So we're really trying to tinker with technology to be able to make this match a little bit more effective. I think this is a problem that more and more people are going to have as they embrace content, and it'll be exciting to see what can come of it on the technology side.
Awesome, thank you. So our next question comes to us from Twitter, and I think, Mark, you could answer this really well. My marketing team and my sales team have very different goals. What should I do as a first step to help them align?
Yeah, so I think that just reiterates, which is important, another key point there around that defining that SLA. All too often, I'm out there talking to different sales and marketing teams many times a week, and I hear the same thing. Sales is in one corner saying, like, the leads suck, and marketing is on the other corner saying, these salespeople don't even call the leads that I work so hard to produce. So you just really have to take that subjectivity out. You've got to sit down in a room together and define what a good lead is and define what the behaviors your sales team is going to use against those leads once they're produced, right? And like I said, the more that you can define the marketing side of that definition, it should be solved deep into the funnel, not at the click stage, not at the visit stage, not at even just the lead generative stage, whether it's based on revenue or pipeline, or my favorite is what I presented to you guys around lead value. Those are the best ways to make sure that alignment occurs well.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so our next question is coming from the questions panel. I think this goes really well, Mark, with what you were talking about, especially when you were talking about a salesperson should take some time and post in LinkedIn groups, look on social media, read some blogs, post on blogs. How do you measure the success of this, especially because it's coming from the sales team who normally looks at success in revenue and in other hard metrics?
Yeah, I mean, good question. Hard thing to measure these days, but it all gets back to how do you measure the success of cold calling, right? I mean, how do you measure the success of email? I mean, it's just another time campaign and tactic that they're using. And ideally, you get down to a number of hours spent, and then you can see what kind of leads came from it and what kind of customers and revenue come from it. It's hard to measure that stuff, but that's what you'd want to strive to do. So, I've seen some teams actually get really good about, total number of, retweets and interactions in social, and what % of them lead to a conversation, what % lead to a demonstration, what % lead to a customer, and that's what you have to strive to do. If you're doing that on the prospect and email side, you should do it on social as well.
Awesome, thank you. Josh, a lot of questions have come in about the buyer personas that you were talking about. I'm going to list them all off, and you can go as you like. Where do you start with them? What if people don't agree? How many should you make, and how often should you really change them?
That's a really good question. There's no really right or wrong answer for this. I would say identify your key offering, and then who are the people that would be most interested. Ideally, you should boil that down to a few at least to start. And then from there, you can start working with marketing and sales to identify who are the people who are already showing interest, who are the people that you would like to go after, and then build personas around those. And you can start by the people who are already your customers and dig a little bit deeper into who are those people. Maybe you contact them and reach out to find out who they are, what their interests are, what other tools and services they might be using, et cetera, so that you can really build out a fully fleshed out profile for each person.
Awesome. Thank you. Coco, we've got some questions coming in about social selling I'd love to hear your opinion on. My first one is, how do you leverage your online profile, and what is the best way to present yourself in order to find the right people?
Great questions. So I'll answer the first one. I think that, we're seeing the turning point over the last year or two as social selling is becoming more and more of not just a buzzword, but a practice within organizations. Sales professionals, everyone really, every professional really needs to understand that their LinkedIn profile is not their online resume, and they need to take themselves out of that frame of mind. It's your online brand in many ways. It's your personal profile, your professional profile. So what I think that salespeople or marketing professionals or really anybody that's in the professional space needs to understand is that they need to use their profiles as a resource and not the resume. Internally, we call it resume to reputation. And it's really the transformation of how do you leverage your online persona to become a resource and build that reputation and build that personal brand that you want to be known for.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. My next question is going to have to go to Mark. A lot of people are asking about social media, and I think you touched upon this with the different things that you were talking about topics. One of the main things was how can you make sure that your social media is effective for a B2B company? This was specifically about Facebook, but I think that this can relate to most social media networks.
Okay, so I think the mistakes people make there often is they are a little too cutesy out there and not aligned with what people are actually looking for. They're just updating people about random things that are going on as opposed to content that's aligned with the specific questions that they have. So I think getting back to one of the cycles that I was bringing people through. Things like statistics, I think work, for me have worked exceptionally well there. Quoting either yourself or other people around a quick trend that would lead to a blog article. And I think especially I do see a decent number of social media messages that don't lead anywhere, which is fine if it's thought-provoking and there to drive your following. But I mean, a lot of, you should lead it to something. It should be sort of a taste of something, of a bigger piece of content, usually like a blog article. So those are often the most effective, and the more that it can be aligned, the better. The other thing that people don't take advantage of as much is just referencing the same article or content multiple times across social media. I mean, social media is noisy. Yes, it is. So it's okay if you write a blog article to schedule 3 or 4 tweets about the same article over the course of the week. So many people they write an ebook and they tweet it and that's it. So you can easily come up with a wide variety of tweets that it's a couple minutes of extra effort, and that could have a 2-3x effect on the overall success of that particular piece of content. So don't forget, don't overlook the opportunities to kind of repurpose that content with different messages out there in social media.
Awesome, thank you. So we've got a couple questions coming in around the same theme. Josh, I'm going to have it go over to you first, and then I think Mark, you might want to jump in as well. But the first question came to us from Brittany in our chat panel, and she says, how can you sell the idea of more collaboration to the company's owner or upper management and the sales team? I find they never want to take time away from what they're doing, especially cold calling, she's saying, so obviously relating to sales. So Josh, what would be your advice about selling the idea of collaboration to upper management?
I think the best way to sell collaboration into an organization that isn't quite yet familiar with it is the benefit to the customer. When teams inside companies work better together and they share information about their customers and what the customers need, they're better able to serve the needs of the customers and thereby close more sales. Especially if we're talking about spending time on collaboration versus cold calling, we're looking at working together better so that when those cold calls occur, they can be more effective. So yeah, you're taking some time away from that exercise, but in the end, the results will probably be a lot better. So I would sell it as something very results-oriented that you can expect to achieve better results and hopefully close more sales.
Awesome, thank you. Mark, do you have anything to add about selling maybe some more of the technical stuff like you were talking about with the holding each other accountable to upper management?
Yeah, usually the SLA stuff, and I noticed that was a question that trickled in, it actually isn't usually an issue with upper management. I think upper management usually loves that because it's such a great way to hold people accountable in a scalable way. Along the collaboration front, and both the measurement piece too, especially if you're dealing with a reasonable sized organization, oftentimes it's good to sell it by starting with an experiment, a small contained experiment. It's harder for executives to kind of take the step into a big leap into this huge change unless they're fully behind it. Which is much easier to sell that you may take a smaller team or a pod and run an experiment for a month or two to see what the impacts are. That helps an executive get comfortable about the mechanics of it and what kind of ROI they'll see if they roll it out fully.
Great, thank you. Coco, we've had a lot of questions coming in that I think would be great for you to answer. How do you reach out on social media and in social selling without sounding like a sales pitch at first?
Another great question. I think this is something that I probably couldn't answer more times, because it's so important. I think that as sales professionals, the way that the sales profession has changed, we really have to understand that we have to quit selling, that we have to start educating, and we have to start being in a position as a sales professional where we are the advisors, the trusted advisors, not overusing the term, for these customers. So when you're reaching out to these people for the first time, don't talk about your product. Talk about the pain that they're having. Why do you think they're having these problems? You should be leveraging insights in some way. Everything we do here at LinkedIn, and I think that should be expanded into every company, it all should be data-driven. So if you see something happening in the market, if you know that there's a trend in the industry, you use that information. Leverage your connections. That's something that great salespeople do very well, that a lot of sales professionals aren't really doing that much of. Leverage your connections to get into these accounts, and leverage those connections to make the introductions, because we know that the propensity of getting that first meeting, which is usually the linchpin, is so much easier if you leverage an existing connection of yours or of your team to get into that account. So I think that the most important rule is to, when you make this first introduction, don't sell anything. Go in there really asking questions. Understanding the insights based on the industry. You should be really well versed in the industry you're working in, and provide those insights. And when you do that, I think that the buyers are a lot more approachable, and they'll end up really wanting to talk to you because they'll think that you have information that they want to know about.
Awesome. Thanks, Coco. So to go off of that, it seems like you're talking a lot about going in as an individual on your individual profile and talking with these people. Do you ever think it's beneficial to post or to talk to people as a company, or should you always go in as the individual?
So, I think that's another great question. I think that what we should be doing is coming from a personal level. My knee-jerk reaction is that people buy from people, and that anytime that you can break down the wall of being a brand, people don't like to be talked to by brands in most cases, because then they start feeling like they're being sold to. So I think that anytime you can add your personality and your own, your own face to the conversation, it adds some value to it, and credibility and transparency. I see, obviously, I'll give some props here to HubSpot. I mean, you look at the HubSpot sales team and the team that they've built there, and even though HubSpot is the machine that they are, I think Mark can even expand on this even further. Your reps are very social as individuals, and I think that that is a model that most companies should take. I mean, we take it here internally at LinkedIn, where every individual is promoting through their own profiles. But I think that that's where business needs to go, where the brand is really becoming the voice of, where the market is going, and the individual reps, the people that work in the company, are really becoming the advocates.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question coming in about the content that you're posting. Mark, I think this would be great for you. How do you decide who should be interviewed for content? This is when you were talking about, where to come up with these ideas. There's a little bit of confusion. Are these customers that you're interviewing? Are they influencers? Is there another place to look for this content?
Yeah, I saw that question. Great question. The answer is all the above. I think the easiest way to orchestrate it, and the most common that I've seen, is just keeping it internal. There's just a lot, just from a logistical standpoint, it's easier to pull off. And just whoever is a thought leader. I think in most organizations it's always the C-suite, right? Especially like the chief marketing or head of sales and the CEO. These are people who are typically out there. They're experts in the space. They're talking to customers all the time. Most of the time it's the sales team too. These are the people who are out there. They get the same 50 questions every single day. And each of the answers to those questions are great blog articles. In fact, I was just talking to someone this morning that's a gold mine to find is going to the sent mail of your salespeople. And usually there's a ton of potential block articles in there because these are questions that are coming in from prospects that they're really good at answering and are just great to put out there in sort of the public eye. And then, if you're selling a more technical product, your engineers are oftentimes folks that could be good. We're going through this on our sales blog here at HubSpot, and we've gone out and assembled a list of about 40 thought leader friends of ours. These are authors in the space. There are other VPs of sales and executives out there. There are coaches. There's trainers. It's not hard to say, listen, would you mind showing up to a 20-minute interview on a topic that you love talking about so we can ghostwrite an article on your behalf? They'd love that, right? So, you certainly can reach beyond the company boundaries to the thought leaders as well. It's a little more difficult to orchestrate, but it's worth it. And then finally, yes, customers. I mean, they provide the best ones as well. I think the thing you have to be careful there is they have a natural tendency to talk about the product, which sounds like it would be good, but just not appropriate in this particular context. Save that for your case studies. Save that for the content that's appropriate for, deeper in the buyer journey. But they're great people to be talking about sort of the context and problems that they were facing and some of the ways they were thinking about solving it.
Awesome, thank you. To go off of the theme of being appropriate, a question has come in. I think, Coca, this sounds best. You were talking about putting the salesperson's personal page in front of the company and making them part of the company. How do you figure out, during the hiring process for a salesperson if that person is going to be a good advocate for your brand?
So I think the easiest answer is to look at them online. I think, when we hire people, when I hire someone, as I think that any really progressive company does, we look at the social profiles, we look at the footprint of those employees, and we want to make sure that they're appropriate in these environments. Especially if you're hiring them for a job that is in a social capacity, or you work for a company like LinkedIn or HubSpot where you're a very social business. You got to make sure that these people are presenting themselves already in a professional capacity. It's are their profiles complete? Are they sharing relevant information? Or are they sharing pictures of them doing cake stands at some frat party? I mean, these are the things that you need to steer away from. But if they are in tune within an industry, even if it isn't yours, if they're talking about things that are insightful and having conversations with other thought leaders or other people in that industry, I think that these are things that when you're hiring a new salesperson, you want to look for. Internally, one of the things that we do, and I think is a great model for any company hiring salespeople, is when you're hiring somebody based on a territory-based sales model, look at their connections. Are they connected to decision makers in the territory that you're trying to fill the position for? If the answer is yes, the chances of them being successful, which is what we want all of our employees to be, is much higher than hiring somebody that doesn't have the connections you want and maybe has great connections but in another territory. I think that as we start becoming better at hiring individuals based on social data, we're going to start realizing that when we leverage it the right way, that we're going to become much more successful businesses by leveraging these employees. That's great. Thank you so much. We have a couple people asking questions, and I think this obviously would work really well for Josh once we all hear the question. This person uses Evernote for their own personal needs, but they aren't sure how to use it to help them assist them in the 3 C's that we've talked about, which, to remind everyone, are content, context, and collaboration. Josh, can you speak to this for a moment?
Sure. Well, thanks for being an Evernote user, and we like you. And definitely in the work context, Evernote can be a really helpful tool for you. It's really designed to help you capture, collect, and share really any information that you want. But specifically, if we're talking about the 3 C's, as you're working on creating buyer personas, you can capture all the relevant information that you think might help flesh out those personas in Evernote, and then you can write up those personas in Evernote once you're done collecting the information. Once you've built those personas, then it's really easy for you to share them directly from Evernote with members of your marketing team or your sales team. You could share an entire notebook of those people, those personas, with everyone that's on your team so that they can chime in with their own ideas, so that you're working together to really build out who these people are that you're talking to. And then, of course, sales can then contribute to those ideas also. So as you're collaborating with the people within your company, they can contribute their own thoughts on these personas, and they can add their own sales tools or requests for templates or scripts. They can put all of those requests into Evernote, and then marketing can help build those out also within Evernote. So this can really get you out of email and help you collaborate better so that you're creating the content that will really be relevant for everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Mark, I have a question for you coming in. We talked a bit about, or a lot about sales stuff and cold calling on this. Do you still think cold calling is an effective method for a sales team?
It can be. It takes a lot of skill to pull it off and make it profitable, but it certainly can be. I've never seen a situation where it shouldn't be used as a last resort. Like, I think that the problem is it's been around so long that people gravitate to it too quickly and underinvest in a lot of the stuff we've been talking about on today's webinar. So an example, if I meet a startup, oftentimes they're like, all right, we've got product market fit, let's start selling. And they'll be like, we're going to hire 3 BDRs to set appointments and 2 reps to start closing deals. Well, fine. But how about this? Hire 2 BDRs and 2 reps and 1 journalist. You know what I mean? And start to, it's like the same cost, and people just don't think that way. So, and then fine, if you're gonna set a goal of like $100 a day, why don't you set it at $60 a day with an hour of social media time for each rep? Like, just think about it a little differently. We went to it as an extreme last resort at HubSpot, and it's fine. It's a profitable exercise, but it's nowhere near the profitability that our other channels in social and inbound are, and I've seen that across most companies. Now, if you are going to do it in a modern way, and usually modern means both in the way you use technology and the way you use context, right? So, with technology, we tinker with a lot of stuff in the HubSpot sales labs, many of which we've commercialized at. If you want to go to www.getsignals.com, we've made a lot of this free for our users. But things like, whenever, if you are prospecting and doing voicemails and emails, like, the technology exists for salespeople to know when people open the email. Like, a lot of cold callers, I'm like, how do you know if it's working? Like, if they call me back or if I get them on the phone. Well, in this technical age, the technology age, there's ways to know if they open your email, and that's a good indication to get back to know whether those efforts are actually working. You should have, when these people do get back to you, you should actually know if they've been engaged in your funnel before, like connect marketing and sales to know if they've been any nurturing campaigns or on the website at all. If I talk to people, the starting point of cold calling is to source and find leads, right? So many people do a Google search and then click on the link and go to the website and read about it, and then go into LinkedIn to check who they know, and then go into Salesforce to see if they exist. And it's just a lot of clicks and a lot of time, and there's technology out there that can streamline like that whole thing and bring it all together to make that a 30-second process for people. So definitely use technology if you are going to cold call and take advantage of those tools. The other thing is the context, like I talked about. Just because it's a cold call to someone you've never spoken to before, there's a lot of information out there about them. Do the research. Look up online. People are usually pretty good at company news, but go beyond that. Do they have a social presence, and what are they talking about? What's their history been like on LinkedIn in terms of their work history? Do they come through product or sales or marketing or on the finance side? Because I'm probably going to approach them very differently. And usually I can find something that feels not like, doesn't feel like a cold call because it's contextual to stuff that's going on in their life. So, use it as a last resort, and if you're going to do it in a modern way.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Coco, we've had a few questions coming in from people who have never done social selling before, and they're curious, where do you go to start? Like, what is that first thing? How do I find that first person to really, maybe boost my confidence that I can actually do this?
So is the context around how do you find that first prospect?
Yes. Sorry.
So, let's start with the grounder here. Look at the accounts that you're trying to sell into. You should have a list of them, maybe the top 25. Go into LinkedIn and put those accounts in, do an advanced search, and find out how many people you're connected to within those organizations. So out of those 25 accounts, you may have some decent connections into 2 or 3 of them. Now, out of those 2 or 3 accounts, leverage the connections that you have to get introductions to the decision makers that you've identified. When you do that, you're going to realize that these people are going to actually want to take your phone call, or they'll schedule the time with you. It may not be a 1-hour phone call, but it might be 15 minutes out of their day, but at least you're getting the phone call. And if you have your pitch down right, and if you're actually going to be adding value in that conversation, you're going to find that it's going to be much easier than you think it is.
Awesome. Thanks, Coca. So here's a question I think that would be great for Mark, and then Coca, you may want to jump in here as well with some of your expertise. It's a long question, but I'm going to read it off. How do you avoid a prospect getting overwhelmed or inundated with both marketing and sales outreach? Example, our marketing team sends them out a lot of communications like blog posts, ebooks, etc., and then you as the salesperson reach out to them to close a deal, and then there's radio silence. They don't say anything because they've been reached out to too much. Mark, what do you think about that?
I mean, it's a great collaboration example. It happens all the time, especially as marketing and sales are getting more aggressive on things. There just needs to be, sort of an agreed-upon cadence there between marketing and sales. The most common one, and we've done this most frequently at HubSpot too, is defining when sales owns it versus marketing owns it. So, you may have prospects that are just in the early stages of their buying journey where it's not qualified enough to go to sales. So marketing owns that and should have a close kind of eye on making sure that don't oversaturate those folks with emails. You can kind of watch your unsubscribe rate and kind of see whether or not you're unsaturating folks and what that cadence should look like. Once they progress down into a certain stage in the buyer journey that it should be opened by sales, they should be cut off from marketing nurturing campaigns. It should just be in the hands of the salesperson, and that salesperson should be trained to run a specific cadence against them of usually like a voicemail email sequence. They also can't, what we do is provide them the opportunity to put them into a customized drip marketing campaign. The salesperson kind of humanly puts them into that campaign and knows that that particular campaign is driving. Again, the salesperson has control here. And then, if we have a positive outcome and close the business, great, now they're in our customer queue and funnel. If we don't have a positive outcome and we lost it, then that's going to be removed from the salesperson queue and go back into the marketing queue. And hopefully at that point, we've captured even more context about their particular problems and challenges at the business that allows us to send better, more tailored marketing nurturing campaigns to them going forward. Right? So I think the way most people handle it is they kind of clearly define ownership by marketing and sales and hold them responsible for not oversaturating them.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. Well, with that, I am going to close out the Q&A for this webinar. I know I have learned quite a bit from our experts here, Josh, Coca, and Mark. I really appreciate all of our speakers' time as well as our attendees' time for joining us today. As a reminder, this was recorded and will be emailed to everyone who signed up tomorrow or Friday, so be looking for that in your inbox. In that email, you'll have the recording, the slide deck, as well as the free templates that both Mark and Josh mentioned. I also just got word from our blogging team that we will be answering additional questions in several follow-up blog posts. I will send a link as to where to look for those in that email as well. So you'll have all the resources you need to continue your learning on this topic. We really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Have a great day.
Thank you.